This podcast is brought to you by Mercury, the banking solution I use across all of my businesses. I manage half a dozen Mercury accounts, from my personal single-member LLC to MicroConf, our seven-figure global events and education platform, to TinySeed, our venture fund and accelerator. Mercury handles every one of them. Traditional banking forces you to duct tape tools together and work around slow processes. Mercury doesn't. The dashboard shows me exactly where each business stands at a glance. The interface is simple enough for daily banking and paying invoices, but can also handle the multi-step approval processes we need when wiring large sums of money to the dozens of companies we invest in each year. There's a reason more than 300,000 entrepreneurs have made the switch. Anytime founders ask me where to set up their accounts, I send them to Mercury.com. It's free to get started with no in-person visits and no minimum balance. Visit Mercury.com to apply online in minutes. Mercury is a fintech company, not an FDIC-insured bank. Banking services provided through Choice Financial Group and Column NA, members FDIC. Welcome back to another episode of Startups for the Rest of Us. I'm your host, Rob Walling, and in this episode, I welcome Jordan Gall back to the show. Jordan is a longtime fan favorite, and in today's episode, we answer listener questions, ranging from how to compete in a crowded market to what to do when your customers are only problem aware but not solution aware, someone stealing someone else's startup idea, and more. Before we dive into the episode, do you know that I've written 5 books? You can get one of them for free by heading to robwalling.com and look for Start Marketing the Day You Start Coding. But the other 4 books are really good and I think well worth the money. You can head to saasplaybook.com to order PDF or audio copies of the SaaS Playbook and Exit Strategy, as well as Start Small, Stay Small. These books cover different topics for SaaS founders and entrepreneurs. The SaaS Playbook is my best-selling book of all time. It has crossed 50,000 copies sold. So if you're looking to start somewhere, head to saasplaybook.com, grab the PDF or the PDF plus the audio. You can hear my dulcet tones reading the book. And of course, I like to do a little improv as I'm reading. It's interesting when you sit and write a book for a couple years, and then when you actually go to read it out loud, I'm like, oh, I have more to add to that. So I would riff a little bit on certain aspects of it. So that's saasplaybook.com to learn about my 3 most popular books, which are Exit Strategy, SaaS Playbook, and Start Small, Stay Small. I hope you pick one or all of them up if you haven't read them. And with that, let's dive into listener questions with Jordan Gall. Jordan Gall, thanks for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
It's always good to have you here, man. With all your experiences, you're kind of on your 3rd SaaS startup, if we think about it. And I like to have folks with your distinguished experience come and weigh in on some of these listener questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I'm living it every day. I read some of those questions and I'm like, that's happened to me.
Yeah.
Yes, I've made that mistake.
This exactly. No, totally. And this is why it's great. I mean, you hear the episodes with Ruben on them and Derek Reimer and, Craig Hewitt and everything, and Laura Roeder has answered questions. And it's cool to hear everybody's perspectives, right? Because we all have different experiences. But in general, the answers are relatively the same if you've been through this over and over of like, don't do this. Generally, directionally, do that other thing. It's fun to see the patterns.
Right.
So catch us up on what you've been doing with Rosie. For folks who maybe haven't heard of you, which is probably a small subset of the audience, tell us what Rosie does. You've raised a Series A, so you're a bootstrapper at heart. I like to think of you as like Jason Cohen was a bootstrapper and raised a bunch of money. Heaton Shaw's like that. There's a bunch of us that raise funding, and you're one of them. So talk it through.
Yeah, I think of myself and others like me as non-ideological. Whatever approach makes the most sense. Sometimes it's bootstrapping, sometimes it's raising money, sometimes it's something in between, like a TinySeed or fund strapping or something. You just have to finance the business. One way or another, you put your own money in, customer revenue, debt, or equity. Those are your options. You can't make money come out of thin air. So the options are relatively limited, and depending on the situation, you take whichever one makes the most sense.
And Rosie, what does it do?
Yeah, so Rosie is an AI answering service for small businesses. What that means is a lot of small businesses, think about your local service businesses like landscapers, pest control, small law firms, dog groomer, like the Fortune 5 million. They still do a lot of business on the phone. They advertise on Google, people see their phone number, maybe they do a bunch of research online, but then when it's time to call the house painter, people pick up the phone and call. And so the phone is still this very challenging channel for small businesses. And a lot of times people miss phone calls. And when you miss a phone call, you're either making a customer unhappy or you're losing a revenue opportunity. So Rosie was built with this new AI tech that works over the phone on voice to answer the call when the small business owner or their team can't answer the phone. That's where it started. And over the last month, today actually, is our launch day of our second communications channel. And so in 2025, Rosie was an AI voice product. And in 2026, Rosie's going from a uni-channel voice product to a multi-channel customer communications platform. So it's the same Rosie brain, as we like to think about it, that gets to know your business. And then there are just different channels. Someone calls over the phone, that's a voice channel. Someone goes to your website, it's chat or text. Someone sends you an email. So that's our challenge in 2026, is to go from this very, very specific, very easily described solution to a very specific pain point to a bigger opportunity, but also slightly more difficult on the messaging and positioning.
Well, thanks for catching us up, man. I know folks who are paying attention and followed your journey have known for the last few years you pivoted your prior effort, Rally, into this, and then launching multi-channel has got to be a big day. Not stressed at all, huh? Just hanging out. Everything's good.
Sure. I found myself like almost out of breath today. I would just catch myself like, whoa, relax, take a breath here. It's just exciting. So far it's going well, but we're switching billing. It's complicated and it's scary. And like others, the big challenge right now is that roadmaps are like folding in on themselves, because what we thought would take us a year to build out all these channels, with this new tooling, we're understanding, okay, we can probably build all these out in like 3 months. And if that's the case, what should we do first? What does a roadmap look like? What does the difference between a front and a back end engineer look like? What does the product person do anymore? Why am I here as the CEO? What am I doing? So it is a confusing and exciting time.
Confusing and exciting time, I think, should be stitched on a pillow and handed to every SaaS founder on earth.
Yes.
All right. Are you interested in answering some listener questions today? Should we dive in?
Absolutely.
All right. Let's dive in to our first question from Misha.
Hi, Rob. Misha Manolis here. Got 2 questions for you. So we're bootstrapped building Distill EMR. It's an AI-powered medical chart review platform for outpatient clinics. Our ICP is CMOs, chief medical officers, at organizations with 50-plus clinicians. My co-founder is an MD with deep primary care relationships, and we've closed several deals with regional and national organizations in our first 8 months, which is incredible. But healthcare moves at the speed of trust. Even with warm intros and name recognition, deals take 6+ months to close, and onboarding requires customization per client. So the first question I have is, for bootstrapped companies in regulated industries with long sales cycles, how do you decide where to invest limited cash and engineering time when customer feedback is still sparse? And my second question, what are your thoughts on using bank loans or lines of credit against signed contracts where cash won't arrive for 60+ days, but we need capital now, for example, to fund SOC 2 compliance? Any gotchas to be aware of for something like that? Thanks, and appreciate everything you do.
All right, Jordan. So Misha has 2 questions for us. The first one is, how do you decide where to invest limited cash and engineering time when customer feedback is sparse? The classic SaaS conundrum. How do you think about it? You've never been in this situation, so you're just going to have to pontificate off the top of your head.
Well, this situation scares me. This is scary. And I think the whole thing with Misha is that the market is a relatively slow-moving market, right? It's healthcare. And what he mentioned in his question was that they've closed some deals. So they're not just building and guessing, right? They are building and people are paying. And so my immediate instinctual response to his question was, well, don't build anything unless you're getting paid for it. Because there's an enormous amount of risk in bootstrapping into a market with long sales cycles. So unless you really know the space and you want to take that risk of I'm going to build ahead of the market, the fact that they already have customers and each customer requires a certain level of customization, I would really wait for the market to push me toward the right feature set and get paid for it. I think it's connected to a second question that we haven't gotten to yet.
Yeah, well, let's roll right into that. I mean, that was really around what are your thoughts on using bank loans or lines of credit against signed contracts where the cash won't arrive for 60 plus days. You're someone good to talk to about this because I don't know that you've ever pulled debt or revenue-based financing, but you have certainly evaluated it because I remember, having conversations about it.
Yeah, I'm evaluating it now also. And I have not pulled the trigger on it. I haven't needed to, but I've put it in place. And it's kind of amazing what Stripe Capital does in the SaaS toolkit. The fact that you have access to debt at any time with the click of a button really changes that calculation because normally with debt, you have to go get approved. You got to go through underwriting. You got to do a song and dance for the bank. And oftentimes the bank, it almost doesn't make sense for them to give loans to this type of a company. So I always encourage people, check out Stripe Capital to at least understand what that option looks like. So I have that in mind. Have you done any debt?
No, and I mean, it didn't exist when I was I sold Drip in 2016. None of this it was just coming up, and frankly, it always scared me a little bit. And I think if I was going to try to raise money, I would have probably gone with an equity round at the time because we hadn't raised any funding, and so we could have. The debt was always like, then it becomes, for me, the calculus was like, well, now it's a drag on my growth because I have this money coming out every month. And it just scared me a little bit because it's like, how good am I actually at cash flow management? Like, this is not my expertise. I'm like good at marketing and like recording podcasts and thinking about product and making those decisions. And everything else I did, I was winging it. As we all are. And so when I thought of debt.
Can't wing it with debt.
No, I know.
Nope.
That's the one thing I was like, dude, my finances, that's like the worst thing, right? So plus the amount I think at the time that you could raise just wasn't enough to move the needle for us. And so it was always like, maybe we'll do it next month and maybe we'll raise funding next month. And then we had acquisition offers and I was like, why don't we just do that? That sounds easier.
The calculation that always stopped me from moving forward is the payback is pretty short. And so it's like, I'm going to take on $300,000 and then immediately have to start paying like $25,000 a month, which doesn't feel right. It is really tailored for being put alongside an equity raise. That's where it really makes a lot of sense. If you're at 3 million in ARR and you want to get to 5 before you fundraise, you can pull $1 million and you're kind of going for broke anyway. And then you use the money and you push and you try to raise the next round. And if it doesn't work out, like the whole thing's coming crashing down anyway. So it doesn't really matter as much. So it does feel like it works really well alongside the VC path equity raise to extend your runway to give yourself a little more time so that you're not staring down the barrel of a gun with 3 months of runway when you're talking to investors. It's a bad spot to be in.
What do you think about Formica, where he's saying, I have these contracts and it's net 60 terms or whatever it is, and I'm thinking of doing debt for that?
So the first thing is I would only draw the debt under the assumption that that contract is not coming through. And looking through that prism, if the contract does not come through, am I okay? I would not put myself in a situation where I am not okay if that contract doesn't come through, because then you're piling risk on top of debt, and that feels wrong. Now, at the same time, we started this conversation, we mentioned debt and equity and customer revenue. Like, those are the 3 sources of funding. And if you want to stay bootstrapped and you don't want to sell equity, then you should at least be open-minded on debt. But with that said, you have to kind of go into it with clear eyes on what the payback schedule looks like. Usually the payback schedule is pretty tight on a bank loan.
Or the Stripe Capital stuff. It's a good chunk. The interest rates on these are high because they know the numbers and they know how many will default, and there are obviously some predatory lenders out there, but I don't believe most of them are. Einar and I at one point, this is 6-7 years ago, talked about should we raise a debt fund, right? And have TinySeed capital. I don't know what we call it, but whatever. You get the idea. TinySeed RBF. And when we looked at the amount that we would have to charge, the interest rate just to make any money and make it worthwhile with the defaults, it was like, gosh, that sucks.
Yeah, it's harsh.
I don't want to
It's
do
harsh.
that. I know.
I like Stripe Capital because it is very, very transparent. You want to take $250K, you're going to pay $24,000 in interest, period. It's a fixed amount of interest. So you borrow $250, you pay back $274. I like that clarity and not this like 2-year period of what happens and then you have to send financials. And if you get into a little bit of cash trouble, then you're getting into a different category. Yes. So Misha, just be clear-eyed about it and do not count on the contract revenue coming through in order to get you out of the jam.
Yeah, I like that perspective. Now, you're saying even with a signed contract, until the money's in the bank, don't count on it, right? That's essentially what you're saying.
Yes, because
they could default. And what are you going to do?
Yeah,
Sue 'em?
yep.
Yeah, a signed contract is a piece of paper,
yes,
right?
That's right. A signed contract is very different from an enforced contract. And if you're not willing to go out and spend the money to enforce the contract, then you don't have the money yet.
Well, thanks for that question, Misha. I hope our thoughts were helpful. My next question, I'm going to keep anonymous. It was someone who responded to my recent email newsletter. So, Jordan, did you know I have not published original content aside from books? I've not published original kind of blog/email newsletter content since it's got to be like 2012. And I just decided I'm doing it, man. I've pushed 3 or 4 live, robwalling.com, if folks want to enter their email and hear from me once a week with a very thoughtful, original essay. Some of the concepts are things I'm thinking about. Some of them are from this podcast. Some of them are from 5 years ago that I never published. But so far, I'm getting really good responses, positive responses. People are like, hey, it's good to hear from you in writing again, because I publish a bunch of audio and I publish a bunch of video. But aside from books, I don't publish written content. And so I sent emails to however many tens of thousands of people are on that list. And I say, respond with your number one problem that you're facing, because it can help me answer it on the show or potentially, answer it in the newsletter. And this person responded and said, this is a rant, but my number one problem is that any idea I come up with is washed away with a sea of vibe-coded apps promising to do the same thing, but probably not as well. Customers are now reluctant to try any new SaaS app because everyone and their dog is making them now, so us experienced builders get buried. The other issue is that any app idea now is labeled as a wrapper for GPT, and therefore it doesn't have any perceived value even if it does, which makes finding product market fit tough. I'm tired of hearing every 20-year-old now shout on X that they have just created their own SaaS in 2 weeks and they have already scaled to 10K of MRR. So while I don't necessarily agree with this person's takes of customers are now reluctant to trust any new SaaS app because everyone is making them.
Who are these customers?
Yeah, and therefore there's no perceived value, blah, blah, blah. I don't necessarily wholeheartedly endorse that, but I understand that this person's feeling that way, right? So have you thought about this in your space, or how do you think about this more generally?
First, I too am tired of hearing of all the 20-year-olds who get to 10K in MRR the first month. Sure. I think you have to build up some antibodies to the noise. Now, I want to, my very short answer is no, you're letting the timeline get to you and you have to ignore it. You have to build what you think is valuable for people who need it. Okay. However, there's a big difference in who the audience is, who the customer base is. If you're building for the most hyper-aware, if you're building for the timeline, for everyone who's staring at the timeline and talking about it, then you do have an issue around, well, everyone's there is just aware of everything happening. And that does seem a bit high risk or low probability of success to just throw another thing in the mix. But for the most part, most markets are not just staring at the timeline like you and I are. We're in the top 2% of awareness.
When you say timeline, you mean the X or the Meta, the Facebook, the whatever, any social media.
Yes. The noise, the 20-year-olds claiming to get to 10K in MRR in 3 days type of thing. So your customers, if they're not staring at the timeline, that means they live in other environments. Maybe they're even doing work. Crazy idea. And in that case, they're not aware of everything. And you need to go into those environments to show them what you have. I mean, if we look at today, the number of competitors for Rosie is not good. If you were to look at that market today in voice AI, you would be convinced, like this person is, that there's no point at all because it's taken and everyone's got a million things and everyone's vibe coding and nobody values it. I still think it would be wrong. If I were to try to give a little bit more valuable advice than that, I would say to look out into the future a little bit instead of what everyone's building right now. I would try to be thoughtful about, well, okay, if everyone's building this right now, what's coming next? What has a logical progression from where we are today? Right, an example would be like, okay, open claw, whatever the lobster thing comes out, and then you can kind of just squint out into the future and say, oh, people are going to need help. Okay, so that's what's going to come next. So if you try to squint out into the future more, where is it going? And then, yes, I would try to build out into the future a bit more instead of just what's happening right now. And even then, you should expect it's going to be an ocean of competitors. I think it has been a relatively norm for a while in terms of a lot of competition with whatever you build. That is on hyperdrive. Every market will have a lot of competition. It just is what it is. I don't know if you need to care. You do need to care if you're trying to build $1 billion company because you kind of have to win the market. But if you aren't and you're trying to do, $1 million ARR and get there as soon as possible, you have to be really good and you have to be good at finding your market and explaining to them why they should use your product. I think it's okay to have a lot of competition. Everywhere's going to have a lot of competition.
I agree. And I think the thing that I tend to drive home a lot is like, he's basically talking about building an audience or social media marketing. It's like, I'm going to sell everything by posting on X. And it's just like, don't do that. Don't do that. Like most of your customers, none of your customers are there unless you're selling to the same insular indie hacker crowd and you want indie hackers to be your customer and you want to be in the indie hackers and have them buy from each other. It's like, stop. Yeah, no, it's of the 210 companies that TinySeed has invested in, it's like, I think it's just over 4% have any type of social media marketing or any type of audience. The other 96%, they just market. They do SEO. They do cold outbound. They do advertise, pay-per-click. They do in-person events. They do affiliate marketing. They go on podcast tours. They go on YouTube tours. There's 19 other B2B SaaS marketing approaches, and they're listed in the SaaS playbook. And so you're in a bubble. That's how I feel, this anonymous person. You're in a bubble and you think this is how you make it. And guess what? Almost no one makes it. There are how many hundreds of thousands of people follow Peter Levels? 450,000, maybe it's 500,000 now. All of them probably want to be Peter Levels. How many levels are there? There's one. You know what I mean? It's like trying to be, I follow, what's a big band today? All right, so someone who's really popular today, like Blink-182. I'm not dating myself at all. I'm kidding. But like any big band, it's like you follow them and you're like, dude, everybody wants to be like that. And there's like one of them, it's a hit-based business. It's a lot more of a luck. There's some talent, there's some skill, but it's a lot of luck versus actually building a B2B SaaS that solves a problem for a real customer in a real market that is where money's already going to, right? Where there's budget line item for this is hard. And I don't know anything about those markets. It's like, well, you partner up with someone who does, or you work in a business that teaches you, oh, this is the problems that are being solved there. This is the money we're spending. And, you work for other companies. There's tons of ways to do this. Acting like posting on X Twitter is marketing or is going to build you some company that's ridiculous.
The way I solved for this was selling to people who don't care about the tech at all. So he wrote here, the other issue is any app idea is labeled as a wrapper and therefore doesn't have any perceived value. That part is like very, very in the bubble because ideally your customer does not care at all about what you wrapped around. The only thing they care about is the problem. The way I solve for that is to sell to non-technical people. I want to take the magic that's happening on the timeline and put it through this filter of here's your problem, here's a solution. In our product, the concept of an LLM or a model or a prompt does not exist. There is no choose your model, absolutely not. It's just the problem and here's the solution for it. And at least that has worked to give me relief around having to be on the bleeding edge. I mean, I don't really talk about Rosie on the timeline because our customers aren't there. Anytime I post, it's for peers and the general market and investors. It has nothing to do with marketing, not really.
So thanks for that question, Anon. I hope our thoughts were helpful. Next question comes to us from Bailey about whether to offer design partners advisory shares.
Hey Rob, my name's Bailey and I'm a huge fan of the show and the SaaS playbook. Before I get into the message, I just want to say thank you. You're in my ear week in, week out, and it's been helpful whilst navigating this challenging solo founder journey. I'm the founder of UserSound, which is an AI voice survey platform for product managers at high volume product companies. So it helps teams capture qualitative customer insights at scale. I used to be a product manager myself, running quantitative surveys. I felt that they lacked depth and customer interviews were really great, but didn't scale. And so UserSound is designed to sit right in the middle of that spectrum as another tool for product managers to use. The product is live, but it still has some teething issues. I have one paid design partner client and two free design partner clients at large SME and enterprise companies. My target customers are scale-ups and enterprise businesses with tens or hundreds of thousands, if even millions of customers. A big challenge that I have right now is procurement. I have a strong UK network of product managers who want to use the product, but getting internal sign-off and budget approval is slow and often is stalling my momentum. At the same time, I still need to be very hands-on with customers, so deeply understanding how they use the product and where it's falling short. So my question is about incentives. How do you feel about offering advisory shares to people in my network at these organizations that I'm very close with who actively use the tool and help push it internally? And I think my thought process is that the equity would be conditional on landing a revenue generating contract with their company or someone that they know in the network. Is this something you've seen work before, or is this a naive attempt to shortcut proper customer discovery and long sales cycles? Thanks, and I'd love to hear your take.
So, Jordan, what was interesting is when I saw the subject line of this, I thought, oh, he means offering like a freelancer who's like doing design work, right? Or a dev shop, I was thinking, offering them advisory shares in exchange for that. It's not what it is at all. It's like offering advisory shares for people to bring in customers or to, at their own company, become customers, which I've never heard of. So what do you think? Yeah, this is very interesting. What do you think about this?
Yes, same as you, as when I read the headline, I thought about my experience with a design team that I worked with that I did give equity. And they stuck with us for years, and they were amazing, and we treated them like employees, and yes. But then as soon as I started to read, I was confused. And it all made sense as soon as I read the word UK. The buying process in the UK is not like in the US. That is an understatement. You basically need an in, a personal in that like requires a Guinness at a pub. And that's how everything is bought there. And I personally was allergic to it. And I have a lot of sympathy for Bailey that he has to kind of navigate this. So I've never seen equity be offered. I've seen basically bribes. Like, yes, if you help us get into your company, I will give you $5,000 or 5,000 euro. I've seen that, and I've done that on the Rally front when we were selling into the UK. But I don't think this is the right incentive mechanism for someone working at a company. I don't think they generally think that way, and I don't think there's enough energy behind that incentive to push through a buying process that leads to like a closed deal. It's like too distant.
Because it's shares that might be worth something in 5 years or 10 years.
Yes. It's too far apart.
So cash continues to be king and queen is what it sounds like. So I haven't heard that. I totally believe you that that's the buying process there. I haven't heard that firsthand, but now it makes me want to go talk to a few more of my TinySeed UK companies.
Yeah, and convince them to stop selling into the UK is that would be my advice, which is really tough.
Yeah.
Okay, so cash seems like the obvious answer, but it's not necessarily the answer. There are other incentive mechanisms. Like we found that status in the UK is very important. So letting the person be important in the process, take credit, was just as important. And most people, they weren't nearly as transactional as we expected them to be. You know, we're Americans. We're like, all right, how much can we pay you? And they were like, no, that's not what I'm looking for. So I think you have to find better incentive mechanisms. And really the right incentive mechanism is that the solution is so good and important to them that that's the actual thing, that they're going to be the ones that bring it into the company and take credit for it. So that's a bad answer to this question, but I don't know what else.
But it's honest. Yeah, I appreciate that. So yeah, thanks for the question, Bailey. I mean, I guess I haven't really weighed in, but my answer is I've never heard anyone do that, and I personally wouldn't. that's really the end of the story. I think it's not going to be super effective. And I also struggle to compensate with equity. I mean, I guess if there was someone in your network, it's kind of almost like an affiliate deal at this point where it's like they're not going to become the customer, but they know some people that they will refer to become customers, and you're going to pay them in shares, in advisory shares in a startup that may or may not work. And I think Jordan's point is, I don't know that anyone cares about that. So I kind of am on board with his answer.
We had one person on the ground. We were selling into the UK and knew that because we weren't going to the pubs and the events, it was never going to work for us. We paid a consultant on the ground in the UK who knew everyone in the industry and had kind of jumped out on her own to create this consulting company. And we paid her as a consultant, and she basically evangelized our product at the events and the pubs. That was as far as we got into making it successful.
Great advice. So thanks for that question, Bailey. I hope our advice was helpful. Next question it's another anonymous one, also from my email list. And the person said, I'm bringing this one up because I just think a lot of people don't think about this, or they're running into it as well and they don't really know how to describe it. So this person says, my number one problem is that my product is a solution that people are not yet looking for. They might be aware of the problem, but not of my solution. And I would say, jumping in, they're not even aware that there is a solution, right? And so if we look at the 5 stages of awareness from, isn't it Eugene Schwartz? You can Google this. There is a problem-aware audience who is not yet solution-aware, who then are not going to be product-aware, right? And then there's unaware above that and most aware on the bottom. So I laid out a couple things in an email response to them that I can talk about. This is a hard way to go as a bootstrapper. It's really hard. And it effectively means it's mostly outbound. And usually you're either good at that and that's what you want to do, and you want to do outbound and you want to do sales, or you raise money to do this and you really kind of build it up. Start small, stay small. I know it's 16 years old now. It talks a lot about building things for existing demand. And it says if people aren't searching for this, don't try to nights and weekends be a solopreneur and go after a space like this. Now, that was 16 years ago. Things are more competitive. There were more spaces back then that were not as crowded. So I don't want to act like, everyone should go for these greenfield markets. But I do still think that there are small little niches, 1,000 to 5K MRR, 10K MRR, depends on how big you want to get, where people are searching for things. And if you learn a skill set like SEO or content marketing or whatever, that you can get in front of them. So with that said, Jordan, what are your thoughts on this question?
So I have been in this situation with Rally. Outside of the Shopify ecosystem, people knew that their checkout was bad. They did not yet know that they could just replace the entire checkout from their platform for a different one. It was a really tough problem to crack. This person sounds like they need to team up with the person that's in the bubble to throw products in that people are already clamoring for. Now, with that said, if you have an existing product like this, it makes me think of a book I was given by our lead VC called Play Bigger, and it is about category creation. There's some things in there that are related to this. Now, the only thing I've seen work is becoming the person known for the problem. So to articulate the problem well enough, you can buy yourself the attention to introduce a solution. So it's like you need to become the company or the product that is most known for not the solution that you're offering, but for articulating the problem most clearly, so that when people hear your articulation of their problem and it's so spot on, then they believe you're going to be the one that has the solution. The challenge of that is you need attention. Attention's expensive. It's some way or another, you need to get them paying attention to you. And that's the hard part. And I guess that's the part that the SEO and content and blog posts and videos and the media in general that you use to articulate the problem, that's where the Play Bigger book comes in. And it kind of assumes you have budget to go out and yell about the problem. So that's a difficulty for a bootstrapper. You can articulate the problem really well, but if you can't amplify it out there, then it's tough to get attention. But if you shrink it down to a day-to-day bootstrapper problem, in the messaging, marketing, outbound emails, my YouTube videos, all that, I would be describing the problem really, really well and focusing on that 80% of the time and putting my solution at the 20%. That's as good as I can do in this very difficult problem that I personally failed at.
If they don't know there is a solution that exists, a lot of it has to, as you said, it has to be this outbound motion, and that can be creating content and building an audience if that's in your wheelhouse. Folks can go back and listen to my interview with Jay Klaus that went live in the last week or two, where we talk about founder-led marketing. And I say, B2B SaaS founders, maybe 10, 20% should consider it. I do not think it's the majority. And he agreed, and he said, yeah, if you don't really want to do that, to create content, to create YouTube videos, create podcasts, if it doesn't fire you up, you're not going to be good at it, and you're not going to enjoy it. And you can get good at something you don't enjoy, but that's also a recipe for burnout. But that is one way, right, is to build the audience. Another way is just with direct, warm and cold outreach. I also, when I was emailing this person back, said, you can show up where they hang out, right? So you do like Kevin Wagstaff did. He's a co-founder of Spectora, and he and his brother bootstrapped Spectora to multiple exits, but like the first one was a majority buyout at $90 million, right? Just the two of them were the only equity holders. Yeah, he was on, 6 or 8 months ago. They spent a tremendous amount of time, like an inordinate amount of time in Facebook groups, because that's where their home inspectors, where their customers lived. Today, it's subreddits, Facebook groups, private Slacks, forums. It's wherever your customers are. You can also do in-person stuff. You can go to trade shows, you go to industry events, and you can go on podcast and YouTube tours, right? And I'd recommend doing, if you can, do those as a guest, pitch an interesting story and there's 5 YouTube channels that are really big in this space. You can start building your own if you want, but learning how to guest will get you that reach without having to go through the pain of building an audience, because take it from me, building an audience is a ton of work. And so that's it. If you're in a problem-aware space where people aren't aware of a solution and you want to build a little indie hacker 10K a month business, I don't know how you do that. It's too much work. You don't do it. It would be my advice. Go after something where that you can possibly get in front of some type of demand on an ongoing basis. But if you, we talk a lot about, you and I, about ambitious bootstrappers. Like, no, I want to be a 7-figure or an 8-figure ARR company. If I was in this space, and we have there are some TinySeed companies that are just like this, where they have problem-aware audiences who don't know there's a solution. And that's approximately the playbook that they run and that we recommend.
Yep. Hammer on the pain.
Got to do it. So thanks for that question, Anon. Hope it was helpful. Last question of the day comes to us from Jason, and it's kind of a shitty story. It's about a collaborator using their idea to develop it's a kind of a competing or overlapping product.
Hey Rob, Jason here. I'm a full stack developer, dad, musician, and a huge Beatles fan. I like your hat. I'm building an ed tech product that fills a gap in a niche market. It's customer validated, user informed, and will launch as a closed beta in the next couple months. Early on, I was introduced to a key player in the industry, a successful, respected specialist. He was interested in the product, so I had him sign an NDA and I gave him a tour. But the NDA did not have an explicit non-compete clause, just to foreshadow the future here. We've been in a shared Telegram chat. I've shared updates, screenshots, product info. I've had conversations with other key players and potential clients, kind of developing somewhat in the open, using their feedback to make my product stronger. Twice last year, I asked him to get involved. I offered equity at one point. He declined. Earlier this week, he showed me something that he's working on, some software, and many of the features are comparable or exactly the same as an earlier prototype of mine. There's some analytics that are also very similar to recent screenshots I shared in the chat. And he acknowledged that there's some overlap, and I suspect he was showing me this in fairness so that I knew that he was doing it. But despite whatever intentions he had, I feel crushed. I feel like my openness has been taken advantage of and my good ideas are being stolen. When he showed this to me, I said, hey, I prefer confluence to competition. And again, I brought up partnership. He said he'd think about it, but he's a bit of a lone wolf. I feel stung. I've now deleted proprietary info from the chat. I'm keeping my head down on focusing on what I can control, and overall, my product remains largely distinct, and I'm certainly much farther along in my development. But I'm wondering if I misplayed my hand somewhere here. So what do you think about this situation? Is his behavior as wrong as it seems? Should founders make their NDAs more ironclad in general? I try to be a trustful and collaborative person, and I take that as a strength, but what lessons can I extrapolate beyond the obvious ones about him? What would you do? Thanks.
Yeah, Jordan. So he had the guy sign an NDA, but it didn't have a non-compete or something in it, which I think is probably the first thing we would say is obviously you need that. But even then, then you have to enforce it. You need a lawyer. It's like, this is a heartbreaking story. And the weird part for me, I had to wrap my head around why he was giving this other person all of this information ongoing in a Telegram chat. And I think it's because he thought he might become a customer. I think that's what was happening here. But what's your take on this?
Or an influencer, right? Someone respected in the field.
Got it.
That then talks about your product and you borrow that credibility is a great way to enter a market. Absolutely.
Got it.
Unfortunately, this person seems to have seen the opportunity and decided to run with it on their own.
Yep. And this is the biggest fear. And of course, biggest fear of every entrepreneur out there, especially early stage. It's like, well, why? I can't talk about my idea. I need to be in stealth mode so that no one steals it. And the advice is usually like, look, almost nobody's going to steal it. And if they try, they're going to do a poor job. You need to out execute and out market them anyways. Because once you launch, and you have any success, people are going to copy you. What are you going to do at that point, right? That is the advice. Every once in a while, something like this happens that is gnarly. Like this person has unfortunately shared a lot. Like before launching Drip, I had this email list and I was sending screenshots and kind of what we were building and what we're up to. And someone could have taken that and built something, but they didn't really know what we were building because it wasn't like I was feeding them all this information. And in this case, it sounds like the person has a lot of it. So how would you think about this? I guess there's kind of two questions here. How to avoid falling into this trap, even though you should probably be sharing stuff with people. And then, what you do now that he's in this situation.
I don't know if there's much avoiding it other than using your radar. If things don't feel quite right, then you should pay attention to that radar as early as possible. And other times there's just nothing to do. This is just the big ocean full of sharks. This is just hardball and how it unfolds sometimes. I had this happen to me at CardHook with a marketing partner who just ripped everything off. just pixel for pixel. One of those jobs where you then look at the source code and it still has your copyright and your code in it.
Oh yeah.
Because they really just ripped it off. And it is is emotional problem first to address because it is dispiriting. It is depressing. And that is the enemy of running a startup. The confidence and the optimism is necessary. And to have something like this happen very early on is dangerous because it can break you before you have a sense of confidence. At CardHook, we were up and running. We were probably somewhere in the area of $100K a month at that point, but it still felt like this betrayal. Now, I do want to just inject into this that a very strongly worded letter from a lawyer can be very effective. It depends on the person. It depends on the situation and what the resources are of the other company, that sort of thing. But a very scary letter from a lawyer can be worth your time and the money that it takes. So I would incorporate that into my general response. Probably, though, it's not going to do anything. It might. So for the risk reward for spending $500 or $1,000 with a lawyer and putting that out there, the on paper, on the record threat can be very effective. So don't discount that. At the same time, if this had happened on the other side of launch, then it would be effectively the exact same thing, like another competitor in the market, but it wouldn't have the same emotional issue or response. And so I would just think of it that way. Once you get through this, you're going to launch, and then people are going to copy the hell out of your product anyway. The market as it is right now, anyone can kind of build any product they want pretty quickly. If you get any traction whatsoever, you're going to have competition. And so just pretend like this is after launch and a new competitor comes in and it sucks, but that's just the reality of being in the market. So it's a bit of a test on, do you really like this category? Do you really like the solution and product? If you do, then you have to ignore it. And there's room for everybody. And yes, it will absolutely annoy the hell out of you to watch this person succeed in the market alongside you, maybe even eclipse what you're doing. And that's just part of the game. Sucks. I'm sorry this happened to this person, and I feel for them, but it's a bit of a test.
I really like that mindset, thinking about it of hey, it does suck. And I feel the same way. I feel really bad for this guy. I think the thought that This is like the 1 in 1,000 that this happens. And so it doesn't mean that everyone should take this as the one example. You know, I see this on X Twitter where the bootstrappers pull out the article of like the VC founder who got right, who like raised money, and then the VCs kicked him out or he left, and then like 5 years later it sold for $300 million and the person got nothing because they were so diluted or whatever it is. Usually there's more to this story. Usually that founder pulled out a bunch of secondary when they sold in their series B, C, and D, and they have 10, 20 million in the bank. And usually they screwed themselves. But let's just say, no, venture capitalists screwed the guy on this one. And then people are like, see, you should never raise venture funding. And it's like, dude, your story is not my data. Like, it's not it, right? And so a single anecdote, but it does suck when it happens, right? In this case, especially, I feel bad for him. But I like your thought about the mindset, you know, of, hey, if it was post-launch, it's going to happen too.
In business, there is injustice everywhere. Things that should have happened, the reward that should have been had, this thing should never have happened, Apple screwed you. It's like, it is a normal part. And this does suck. Hopefully, they can use it as fuel. You know, like the amount of joy I had watching Fast and Bolt implode after watching them like talk smack for like 2 years, you know, a little payback.
Yep.
Look, if the person loves the solution and the space, then just keep going. Keep going.
Yeah. Of all the people, all the founders I know, though, you are exceptionally good at saying, what is it? Nobody cares, work harder or something like that. I think that's one of your things but you mean it. And I get you that you really feel that. I can say that. I still get super pissed when people copy me. Really mad. Like, people copied MicroConf in our community in the early days. They copied HitTail, pixel for pixel. Definitely saw a few copies of Drip, some which worked and some which didn't. Copies of TinySeed, yes. You know, I mean, it's like everything I've ever done that's had any meaning has been copied. And every time it makes me mad. And it hasn't even been to this degree, you know, where it's like I'm sharing something out of trying to give somebody a benefit of the doubt. So...
yeah, it still bothers us. I mean, Rosie has been cloned.
Oh, I bet.
So much. There's like, hey, Bobby, hey, Josie, hey, hey, Julie. There's everything. And we don't like it. We don't let it like get to us too much. But Rock, you know, my co-founder, CTO, he does get an enormous amount of joy at blocking people because we have a self-serve free trial. So we have 1 to 5 cloning competitor types signing up every single day. And Rock gets a little hit of dopamine and he's blocked. No, I see the same IP address, different email, different, you know, so he's like, he's Gandalf. You shall not pass at Rosie. It's awesome.
Oh, that's good. That's funny. It's the game, unfortunately. So yeah, I don't want there to be injustice in business and in the startup space. And it is a painful truth. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And obviously our feelings go out to, you know, the question asker here, because it sucks and it would bother me too. But I think you've offered some pretty significant advice for him. So, sir, thanks so much for joining me once again on the show.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for everyone that wrote in with the questions and got us going on these topics. And hopefully it's helpful.
Yeah. And if folks want to keep up with you on X, you are at Jordan Gal, Gal. And if they want to see one of the best answers, I always say, with Ruben, I always say, but one of the best electronic signature. But I'm trying to think of I need to go to your H1 and do this. All right.
Well, you know, if you have advice for me, please give me, because we're about to change over from the easiest is actually our positioning, the easiest AI answering service for small businesses. And now we have to talk about multiple channels. So that's our challenge. Yeah, and I'll be on Brian and Justin's panel podcast in the next week or so, talking about all the development changes and challenges. It's a wild ride right now in software. It is a trip. And it does feel like an amazing opportunity. I think everyone's kind of exhausted by the opportunity and not sleeping enough. But it's so cool. It's so amazing, all these things happening. It's great.
And that's heyrosie.com for the AI answering service for your business calls. The easiest AI answering service for your business calls. Thanks again, man.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Jordan for joining me on the show. In addition to co-founding Rosie, Jordan is also a coach with our TinySeed SaaS Institute. That's our premium coaching program for founders doing 7 and 8 figures of ARR. If you're looking for a highly curated community of SaaS founders, seasoned mentors, and top-tier dedicated coaches, you should head to saasinstitute.com to get the systems and the support you need to scale from $1 million to 10 million and beyond. Jordan is one of our coaches, as well as Taylor Hendrickson, Mark Thomas, and several other highly competent folks who know SaaS inside and out. So if you're interested in that one-on-one coaching, direct access to subject matter mentors, a curated circle of ambitious founders, and a private members-only community, saasinstitute.com. Thanks for listening this week and every week. If you keep listening, I'll keep recording. This is Rob Walling signing off from episode 824. Listener, if you've made it this far, you know the drill here. Jordan's my long-term friend, and when I bring long-term friends, people I've known for 10, 15 years on the show, I ambush them with ridiculous trivia questions.
I was going to say, maybe they know the drill. I did not know the drill.
You don't listen to my podcast anymore.
I think I turned it off after this.
I do this to Derek Reimer all the time, dude. And I just pick a topic that sometimes, hopefully, they know something about, and sometimes they don't. So the topic that I picked is the Bee Movie.
Oh, okay. That
Have
is.
you seen this?
Have I seen
this
it?
film?
There, if I went downstairs and brought my wife up into this room, and I'd say, "What's the funny joke that the whole family knows when it comes time to choosing a movie? What's Dad gonna say 100% of the time?" And she would say, "Bee Movie."
Bee Movie.
Bee Movie.
Perfect. Well,
Jerry
then
Seinfeld. Perfect movie.
ChatGPT steered me right. It pulled a quote from you from an interview on a podcast. Because I said, what are Jordan Gall's hobbies? And I was like, skiing, family, driving to random places in Illinois. You know what I mean? I'm like,
yeah.
And I could ask you questions about Portland, Oregon. There's a bunch of other stuff. But I asked ChatGPT for B movie trivia questions. We're going to start easy. We're going to go hard. We got 5 of them.
Oh,
okay?
jeez.
We're going 5 for 5 today. I want you 5 for 5. All right.
Wish me luck. Because I love the movie. I don't know about the details, but we'll see.
Totally. So difficulty 2 out of 10. What is Barry's job immediately after graduating from college?
I can't believe you're doing this to me. Hold on. Let me pull up the browser.
I love every minute of this.
His job right when he graduates is he doesn't like the job. He wants to be a fighter pilot. His job is like, I don't know, like clearing out old wax or something. I don't remember what it is.
Is he a worker at Honex Industries specifically assigned to stir honey? Does that sound familiar? That's what ChatGPT told me. Yes, I'm gonna take that as
seriously a honey stir.
Honey stir. That's what it is. All right. Here's a difficulty 1. Who voices Barry B. Benson?
Seinfeld.
Seinfeld.
The main character.
The main character. Yeah. Yep. All right. So you got 1 out of 2. What is the name of the human woman Barry befriends?
Oh my God, his girlfriend. He flies into the greenhouse.
He's never coming back on this.
I mean,
podcast.
this is crazy.
It's a new low.
I'm thinking in Jerry Seinfeld's voice right now. Is what I'm doing.
Starts with a V. Hint, starts with a V.
Vera? Vanessa?
There it is.
Vanessa.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to give you that. So 2 out of 3. What is Vanessa's profession?
Sweating.
Sweating is not a profession.
Well, that's my current profession.
I love that you can run a startup and do all the crazy ups and downs, and I ask you questions about a movie you've seen 58 times.
So many times.
Sweating.
Love that movie. Okay, she goes on her laptop. Her husband, okay. Is she a lawyer?
She's a florist.
Oh, hence the bee attraction. Okay.
Hence the bee attraction.
Totally off. 0 out of... totally
you're
wrong.
at 2 out of 4. 2 out of 4. 50%.
Generous scoring system.
All right. What? Last one. I was going to go up to difficulty 10. I think you might implode.
Yes.
So I'm going to do a difficulty 5. That's your hardest. What product does Barry see in a grocery store that shocks him and sets off the main conflict?
I mean, he sees like the bear, the little bear honey. And he's like, oh my God.
Jar/bottles of honey being sold by humans.
And then he realized it's big
right.
honey. It's not what he thought it was.
3 of 5, sir. 60% D-. You just passed.
I appreciate that.
One point left and you'd have been an F. Thanks for coming on. I hope that this doesn't dissuade you from coming on to a future episode.
Oh, absolutely not. I'm looking forward to it. It's good to get the juices going. And I'm still not relenting. I will still suggest B-movie every time my family wants.
You're like me with The Thing, 1982, and Blade Runner. Those are my 2 movies every time. I'm just like, oh yeah, I watched that yesterday and I could watch it again today. See, my kids are older, so we can watch horror movies.
Oh,
so.
Good for you. Yeah,